right, everybody. Thank you for coming back to the Champion Spotlight. I am your host, Dr. Megan Brown. I am the creator of the Raise Your Game program, which is a physical, mental, nutritional, and goal-setting program to help you become a champion in life. So today, as always, we have another champion in life. We have John O Sullivan. He is the founder and CEO of Changing the Game Project, which provides parents and coaches with tools and resources to return youth sports back to the kids and allow them to have fun and play again. Super, super important. He's also a former pro soccer player, coach, speaker, and author. So John, how you doing? Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on. I'm doing great this morning.
Good. And you're out in Oregon, right?
I'm in Oregon, yes. Originally an East Coaster, but I fled the jurisdiction quite a while ago.
Nice. So I just wanted to have you on the show again today, talk a little bit about what you're doing. I think the stuff that you've come up with, I've listened to your TED Talks and read a little bit about everything on your website, but I just wanted to share with my audience, I'm a lot into sports. I do a lot with youth athletes. We have the stuff here at the Lax Box, and we always try and get parents and coaches especially to understand that, there's a lot of dropout with kids playing sports, and it's usually because of us, us adults that are making it not fun for them. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the Change Your Game project?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks again. I started this after time as an athlete, time as a coach, as a college coach, as a youth coach, everything in between, when I really felt like there was a big need to just get good information in the hands of parents and in the hands of coaches. I thought there was a lot of misinformation around soccer, which I was coaching, but then I soon realized that was around all sports. And so what I really felt was like, man, if we can give people good information, then they're going to be less scared. They're going to be less fearful of missing out. And if I could describe what we do in a nutshell, it's trying to get people to stop looking at just this slice of youth sport in front of them now or this month or the next 3 months, and look at the journey, look at the big picture. Look at what do you want to get out of sports? Why are you really putting your kids in sports? And then that encompasses, great and positive coaching that encompasses the work that you do with developing all around athleticism and fundamental movement skills, and not just soccer skills or lacrosse skills or whatever. And with the end goal being that this great human being who loves sport and moves safely and efficiently emerges from it. And if they happen to have the genetics and the love of sport, of a particular sport, then maybe they'll get really good at that one, but maybe they won't.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
And do you feel sometimes that parents and maybe coaches, they look at these young kids not as kids but as almost mini adults, and then we start treating them even mentally and physically like that, and that's why the burnout happens? Or what's your take on that?
For sure. And I think one of the biggest challenges many youth coaches face is, you get parents or something of a 12-year-old and they say, I want my kid to train like LeBron James. I want my kid to train like, insert professional athlete. I see on YouTube their training thing. Why aren't we doing this? And what we have to get across is, what were they doing when they were 12? Because it wasn't that, right? Because if it was that, they wouldn't be walking at 25, right? And
Yeah,
we see
absolutely.
this sometimes now with, I read a fascinating article last year about basketball players, and they were just talking about all the college and NBA injuries, the Achilles injuries and stuff. And they say a lot of those basketball players, because of this overemphasis on playing and massive training load that they're putting in, oftentimes their like highest vertical jump ever comes when they're like 16, 17. They're actually already declining when they hit 20 because they've just pummeled their body. And, we're designed to move and move for a long time. And we try to condense it into such a short window that we injure more people than we actually help.
Yeah, I think, that's a huge thing that I especially work with young athletes, and even try and educate parents a lot like you do, where, we talk about, okay, if we're keeping these repetitive stresses on these kids and only training them in one motion or one sport, they're bound to get injured. It's not a matter of if, it's when, and especially, things like Achilles, tendonitis or tears, or Osgood Schlatter's and things of that nature, stuff with the knees. All of those things are wear and tear type of things where it's just repetitive and over and over and over. And then if you're not teaching the right mechanics and the right movements and how to balance the body and strengthen certain things, you are setting yourself up for injury. And like you said, you can't treat a 12-year-old like a 25-year-old that's playing in the NBA. You just can't, because they're physiologically not the same, emotionally not the same, mentally not the same. So, but the more that we kind of like, on your website, it talks about putting the play back in play ball again, right? It's the play aspect that I think we lose so often in youth sports. There's coaches or parents are so focused on, oh, I need to do this to get my kid to play in college or get them to the next level, when in reality, they're going to enjoy the sport more. They're going to get to that point if they're moving the right way and if they're learning how to be kids.
Yeah. And, one of the things that happens certainly here in North America is the great accolades for coaches or programs come from winning the 12 and under state championship or national championship. Whereas if you look at like soccer in Europe or South America, or basketball or some of these other sports where the great accolade comes from developing a player who moves into the first team, they're taking a long view. So they take that 14-year-old boy who's going through his growth spurt and they shut him down for 2 months. Right. And they do some movement and some stretching and some strengthening. But when his knees are hurting or whatever, because he's growing really fast, they slow him down. Right. Yeah. What do? We say, oh, well, we got the state cup. You got to play through this. Right. And then they get hurt and then they show up to you and, they have a serious injury. And so it's again, not taking the long view. We take this short-term view because, well, that's what gets me my next team, or that's what gets me known in the coaching circles here, versus where's that kid at 16, 18, 20 years old. And right. And I don't think that's just a sport thing. I mean, that's like a moral thing, right? Like, these are young human beings that have interests and lives outside of sport. And when you've pushed a 16-year-old to her third ACL surgery, something's not right.
Right. Absolutely. Do you feel like with the Changing the Game project that you guys are trying to get that across to parents more, trying to help them to understand, like, what is the mission and how do you give that to parents or help them to understand that?
Yeah, I mean, again, we just try to give them information, first of all. Now, sadly, information is not the problem, right? There's plenty of information out there. We try to attach it emotionally to things, right? We try to tell stories and share stories and everything, because oftentimes the parent who is on the wrong path of pushing their kid into something that they want nothing to do with, or pushing them through injuries, or walking into your office, post concussion and going, can we play next week? Instead of saying, oh my God, what are the long-term effects of this if we're not careful? So we have to also motivate them emotionally. And sadly, a lot of parents, until that moment when you or another physician says, you're done, you can't play ever again, that's when it finally hits, like, oh my God, what did we do here? Yeah. And so it's really trying to get people to realize that and see this stuff beforehand. And it's not always right. Like, I get a lot of parents who will come to my talks and they'll come up after and say, I'm so glad I was here because I didn't think this talk was for me. And I'll say, well, what do you mean? And they'll say, well, it's never occurred to me to, meet a, referee in the parking lot after the game to beat him up or anything like that, because that's what I think of as bad sports parenting. But I realized tonight all the little innocuous things around goal setting, or around the ride home, or acting differently when they win or lose, or things like that. I'd never really thought about that before, but those are the things added up over time that often drive kids out of sport or keep them in sport.
Yeah. And, in your TED Talk, you were talking about the ride home, which I think is really important. Even myself growing up, playing sports since, I don't know, second grade. Sometimes as a kid, you just want to hear your parents say that they're proud of you, or,
Yeah.
I really loved watching you play. And I think so often parents try to become the coaches sometimes too. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think in the sports world, sometimes we have to realize like coaches have their responsibilities and jobs to help grow, these young athletes, but parents, you also have a huge responsibility too in making sure that your kid is getting what they need out of the sport, which isn't just the skills part of the sport. It's,
Mm-hmm.
learning those skills for life pretty much. How
Yeah.
do you approach that with parents?
Well, first of all, recognize that all your children are different, right?
Yeah, true.
That one of them might get in the car and go, "How did I do, Mom? How did I do, Dad?" And another one of them, that question might never occur to them. And so
Hmm.
respect the fact that one wants to talk about it there and, do so, and that the other one might not want to talk about it there, and so leave them alone.
Yeah.
And there's, and find a better time to talk about that. And that's with my own children. Like, I see that my daughter will always ask, my son will ask before he goes to bed that night, and that's when he wants to talk about it. And
Hmm.
then usually my conversation starts with, well, what did you think, or what went well today, and what didn't go well. And then they start being self-analyzing and self-aware, and rather than just you telling them what was good or not, they start paying attention to it, because there's always something good, right? And it's
Yeah.
never perfect. And so if you can get that and really focus on, okay, what do we need to work on in the next week or two or month or whatever, that's where that can be productive. But realistically, for the most part, even the kid who brings it up, 5 minutes max, and then they're done, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then they're like, okay, I'm hungry, where are we going to eat? And then that's it,
Hmm.
and that's
Yep.
okay. I mean, that's okay.
Yeah, definitely part of sports. And I think
Yeah.
that that self-awareness part is big too, because there's so often, even with our youth kids, that we're trying to teach them, like, okay, we don't want to always be telling you what to do. We ask them a lot of questions when we coach. We're like, when would we use this, or why would we do that?
Yeah.
And it gets them to think outside of the box, and then they aren't so scared to be on the field and perform, because now they know that they can do these things themselves too.
Let me add another one to that a friend of mine said to me recently, that I've been using a lot as a parent and as a coach, is starting your question or your statement with the two words, I'm curious. I'm curious what you saw out there when you didn't shoot, right? I'm curious what you saw when you did X, Y, or Z.
Hmm.
Because as a coach, right, oftentimes, right, the player's angle and what they see and you from the side are completely different. So you see the pass into this player, but they're like, well, yeah, I saw that, but so and so was in the way, I couldn't get it there, and that's why I played that one.
Yeah,
And
that's a good
if you
point.
just tell them, why didn't you play into the striker, or why didn't you play into your forward, or why didn't you play backwards, your angle's different than theirs. And if you
Hmm.
give them that opportunity to say, well, I saw that, but that's not, I didn't think it was on, great. And it's hard as a coach and as a parent, but
Yeah.
I've been trying to fight it recently and be like, I'm curious what you saw there, and then they've sometimes kids be like, I saw nothing. And I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
great. We need to work on that. But others have said, well, I saw that, but I didn't think I could get it there because so-and-so was in the way. And then I saw someone else moving over here. And so I wanted to play that ball. Amen.
Yeah. Then you're like,
All
okay,
right.
just wanted to know. Yeah.
Great. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think another big thing that I want to get your opinion on too is, how do we teach, one, our kids, but also our parents, about the importance of losing in a game, and how to, take that as a lesson and how to move forward from that.
Well, I mean, losing is, it's just part of playing any game, right?
Hmm.
You're not supposed to win them all. And I think, first of all, for kids, right, go to the playground when they make teams, they don't stack one team. They try to make them even. And if one team's winning by a lot, they trade some players around so that it's a good game. And if you ask a bunch of kids, would you rather win all your games 10-1 or, win 3-2 this week and lose 3-2 next week? They'd say win 3-2, lose 3-2, right? They like that. So kids understand that. And I think, again, the goal is to win the game, but the purpose of sport is something much bigger. And one of the purposes of sport is dealing with disappointment. And what did you learn from that? And how will you get better? And will it motivate you or will it not? And I think if as parents and as coaches, we can keep the focus on that with our kids, that's okay. But it's those kids who are so tied up in winning and get this fixed mindset around winning and only get rewarded by their parents or their coaches for winning, that really they get burnt out and they drop out. Now, again, that competitiveness, the desire to compete, man, you always want that from your kids. But competing and winning are not really the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that's something in youth sports that has gotten confused. And I don't know how long that's been going on, honestly, but
Yeah.
I definitely think that it's important, for parents and coaches to make that, delineation with kids and let them know that you are going to lose games. That's how sports works. You're, like you said, you're never going to win all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, you're involved heavily in lacrosse and stuff, and it's like, you know what? When you're coaching 10-year-olds or 12-year-olds, you can set it up a certain way that you'll win all your games, right? Like, find the one big, fast, physical kid and just get him or her the ball and then get out of the way, and you'll probably win a lot. But a year or two later, you won't win at all because the rest of your players haven't learned how to play and your team hasn't learned how to be a team. And
Yeah.
so this is this critical distinction between, how I coach in order to win right now versus how do I coach so that this team and these players are prepared to be successful in the years to come. And it's again, it's not the same thing.
Yeah. And, going off of that, I think that finding that area of success and teaching kids, parents, coaches, how to instill that, especially into kids, and letting parents know, like, look, yes, this kid may be fast and good now when he's 10, but we're not going to burn him out, and we're not going to just try and run up the score against this other team because it doesn't help the rest of the kids on the team.
No.
And then it doesn't start to get that, kind of that champion's mindset in the brain of these kids of understanding what a champion is, meaning you're a team player, you're helping your team look good, you're making good passes so that your teammate can, catch that ball and go to the goal, and you're being a good sport, and you're paying attention to the refs, and you're paying attention to your coaches and being respectful. So I think those are all really, really good points. And, a lot of the stuff that I read on the Changing the Game project, I'm definitely in alignment with, and that's a lot of the things that we're trying to do here, with body mechanics and the lax box too. So.
Yeah, well, all I'll say is over the couple decades that I've coached now, I do a lot of small-sided games, and I'm always amazed at the players when you do those games who always tend to end up on the winning team. That you might not say that's my best player, but if year after year, 8 times out of 10 in a 5-a-side, that player's team wins, there's something about them, right? They make the people around them better. And the ones that you might identify as, quote, your most talented player, always end up on the losing team because they don't make anyone around them better.
Yeah.
And I always think that's a really interesting thing. And I'm constantly reminded of that. You set up teams for these things. You're like, ooh, that's a good team there. And then you're like, wow, they keep losing. And on paper, I would have thought that'd be a good group. So what's going on there? They're not making each other better. Whereas that group, they're playing for each other. There's no ego there. And we had this guy on our podcast, Bo Hansen, Australian Olympian, a couple weeks ago, and he said the goal is to be the best player for the team, not the best player on the team. And I think that's such a really great philosophy to work on.
Absolutely. And even just letting kids know, every person that's on the team has a role to play.
Yeah.
Your role in the beginning might be making sure that you're just the loudest cheerer on the sideline to get everybody pumped up, or maybe you're the kid that always leads the team cheer, or maybe you're the one that always wants the ball. But everybody has those roles, and as you grow in the sport, your role might change, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
definitely okay. But I think like you said, parents need to understand this a lot. Coaches need to understand, and it should be all about the kids and getting them to understand that growth and ultimately to become great people, right?
Yeah, definitely, because no matter how good you are, we all end up in the bar league eventually, right? So it's like, who the heck really cares?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, John, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Can you leave us with some words of encouragement on what that means as far as the champion's mindset and motivation?
I think the champion's mindset is, again, don't show up to win, show up to compete. Because when you show up to compete, you're more confident because you control the things, right? You're focused on what's within your control, which is your nutrition and your rest and your preparation and your tactical preparation and your training and your effort and practice, right? And then you focus on, as a team, showing up to just play our very best today and compete and dive for every loose ball and be positive and supportive. That's competing, right? And everything about competing belongs to you. And the teams that myself and my business partner Jerry work with, which have won a lot of NCAA titles and pro titles and all sorts of sports, from lacrosse to soccer to tennis to basketball and everything in between, that's what we teach, right? Champions show up to compete.
Awesome. Well, John, how can people get a hold of you, parents, coaches, if they want to learn more? What can they do?
Yeah, just go to changingthegameproject.com. You can find our blog, the TED Talk, the books I've written, things like that. And also that's kind of the home base of our podcast, which is called Way of Champions, which it's got a lot of interviews with famous athletes and coaches on every what you just said. How do you develop, the best of the best?
Awesome. Well, everyone, make sure you check that out. The podcasts are really great, so give those a listen as well. And John, thank you again for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Megan. Take care.
You too.